My microphone, it only comes up to negative 24 dB. That's not like me. That is not like me. Oh, no, it's hitting 18. Almost. Oh, well, okay. Well, what can you do? I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, but I never got around to it until now because I'm still so amazed how much of a train wreck this is. If you're not familiar with Danganronpa Ultra Despair Girls, first of all, good for you. Keep that up, and I mean that genuinely. But you're gonna get lost very quickly in this video because I'm not gonna bother to provide much context. It's primarily intended for people who are familiar with it, so sorry about that. Now this game, it's almost 10 years old as of the time of this recording, and it's 2023 right now. Next year it's gonna be 10. But the biggest reason why Haiji Towa sucks as a person has been talked about to death, so I want to delve into why the exact same thing actually makes him suck as a character. I want to make it clear that when I say character, what I mean is the definition of what a character is. A vessel used to tell a story. And in this case, I'm accentuating how the story evokes a specific emotional response within the listener, or in this case, the player. In order for me to do that, we all need to understand what Haiji's purpose is in the story. He's introduced as the leader of the resistance that opposes the children that have taken over the world. Right from the start, his role in the story becomes pretty obvious. He's the character who is going to serve as the player's window into the surviving population and how they're coping with the apocalypse, specifically from the side opposing the one that caused it. At first, his interactions with Komaru and Toko overall suggest that he's currently far too traumatized and or just overly cautious to take any serious action, which is just right now a more specific way to call him a coward. The other survivors in the resistance want to fight back against the children, but he just wants to lay low. We've also learned that, yeah, the fact that this place is called Towa City and is run by a corporation called, or was run by a corporation called Towa Corp, and his last name is Towa, none of that's a coincidence. He was, in fact, basically the heir to this place before the kids revolted and killed his dad, Tokuichi Towa, who is the CEO of this corporation. God, I love this script I've written. Between Chapter 2 and Chapter 5, I think it was Chapter 5, man, who cares at this point? You all know which part I'm talking about. Haiji doesn't really trust you, and his reasoning for someone in his situation is relatively understandable. But he does eventually turn around and start trusting you once you start to reason with him. Of course, when you do go to the factory with him, to stop the Monokuma production specifically, he drops the fact that he's a pedophile. This brings up the first and most important question of the entire analysis. Why? Why? Just why in general? Think about this from a writer's perspective. You've established this world in which children have revolted against adults and are actively killing them in the streets. God, I sound so smug when I'm recording this. I'm so fucking sorry. You've established the characters that are children, you've established characters that are adults, and you've established characters that are teenagers, namely Komaru and Toko, as they are the characters that the player controls, and were literally described as children on the cusp of adulthood, thus in a sense being both and neither simultaneously. Now you, as the player character, are literally designed to be the midpoint between the two sides, seen as an adult by children, and seen as an unwise and untrustworthy bitch by the adults, while you're forced to see the rights and wrongs of both sides. This sounds like a perfect build-up to presenting the conflict of the story, quite literally the main idea, which is whether or not we can consider the actions of the children justifiable, and if we can hold them accountable for the damage they've done at all. We literally see Komaru as both a person and a character, swaying between her understandings of both sides, all the while being demonized by both, no pun intended. When it comes to Haiji, at first he just seems like a prick in general, but we've started to learn more about him and why he acts the way he does. Komaru literally gets up and gives a speech to all the adults to not give up hope, and that's what makes him start to trust you more in particular. So in what situation would I want to make that particular character say something that would make the player not trust him? If you're starting to make your player get closer to a character that you've been building up for this long and have started to show signs of his more cooperative side, why would you want to pull this move that essentially hits Control Z on everything you've done so far? Why would you put that line in right before we go into a crucial part of the game in which we have to trust him enough to do this? There are two possibilities I can think of. They both suck. The first one is symbolism, something that some would argue that this is, and I actually have a counterpoint to it. The benefits of this being symbolism do not outweigh the negative consequences of its existence in the story. Let me repeat that. The benefits of this being symbolism do not outweigh the negative consequences of its existence in the story. You already have enough symbolism everywhere else, and this just isn't worth it. The other possibility is actually what this scene was intended to be, as far as I'm aware. A joke. And again, the exhalation of air through one's nose that you didn't get out of a vast majority of your audience isn't worth the negative consequence that this will have on your developing character. Let me make one thing very clear. I am not saying that Haiji should have been written to be a good person. No. Even disregarding how tasteless the entire situation is, you cannot deny that this is going to have an effect on your audience that you probably don't know very well enough if you're doing this. Anyway, I think the most ironic thing about this is that even if you wanted to be a tasteless edgelord while writing the story, they don't even take this trait about Haiji anywhere. They don't do anything with it. This, plus the fact that it is reiterated in quite literally the same exact conversation later in the level, is the only time it is ever used. And that's not even saying much. But here's one thing I also don't understand. Why did you make this joke the only thing you say about this character in his likes and dislikes section of his profile? This section of the character's profiles that you supplied us with is a golden opportunity to present more info about your characters that you probably couldn't find a place to fit in the game's dialogue. I've seen it done quite well in this franchise, and even the same game. This set of likes and dislikes does absolutely jack shit to add to Haiji's character, and it just makes it seem like the writers could not be bothered to develop him any further beyond a joke character, rather than a character that's important to the plot, you know? Like the character that they've been building him up to be throughout the entirety of his existence to us. Here's the funny thing, though. Every time I look back at this character, I can actually point out moments in the story in which I feel like he really could have been compelling and interesting, but they were essentially ruined by the existence of this line and every reference to it. In short, the line makes it impossible for him to actually serve his purpose as a character. And even if this delivery was intentional, well, then it just sucks. Intention doesn't matter when the biggest fuck-up was easily avoidable, and if removed from the character, doesn't change any part of the story. Literally, it doesn't do anything. It just sucks. But now that I've bitched about it, let's see if I can find a solution, because I'm not the kind of person who's just gonna sit there and be like, oh, yeah, you could have done this, and not been like, why don't you try, fuck it, it's 10 years old, who cares? I'm like, at this point, it's just a comedy routine. Honestly, I think the best way to fix this issue would be to first remove any references to Haiji being a predator, obviously, but to then save his first signs of being someone you shouldn't have trusted when you get to Big Bang Monokuma. Which they already do, so that was easy, wasn't it? But let me take it a step further. We want a fine balance between traits of Haiji that make us trust him, and ones that make us not trust him. Why? Because that makes the finale far more emotionally and morally conflicting than it stands right now, minus everything that has to do with Monica. That's a whole other can of worms that I have no expertise in as of right now, and I've seen people tear it apart way better than I ever could. Like a fucking fall off the bone ribs, goddamn. The entire gist of the finale is that you're being yelled at by multiple people to break or not to break a controller. That is the question. And you persistently have to make the right decision over and over and over again. This is a very easy thing to do when the one pedophile in the room is looking at you and telling you to break it. Gee, I wonder who I should listen to. If you were to make Haiji more of some sort of, like, sympathetic character, this would instantly make the finale far more conflicting and fit way more accurately with the theme of the game, because you actually care about him in some way. I know, that's such a mind-boggling concept. I bet you can't even comprehend that. Can you imagine caring about him like that? Jesus. Yeah, you can make a character sympathetic and also a villain. A lot of great villains are the ones that make good points. Conflict is what drives a story. Dive into it. But how do we make Haiji a sympathetic character? You're already on the right track. Christ, I have an idea that's actually based on something that's bothered me about him for a bit. Whenever Haiji tells you about his trauma caused by the kids taking over Towa City, he speaks about it in very broad terms. He talks about how he's watched his quote-unquote loved ones get killed right before his eyes, but he never specifies who, not even the specific relationships, like his mom, brother, cousin, friend, college roommate, guy who patted him on the back and told him he'd be alright while he was drunk and vomiting into a toilet at a party. Come on. The problem here with Haiji's character is that we don't know much about anything about his life. We know that Tokuichi Towa was his father, but we don't know much about their relationship. Hell, whenever Haiji talks about his father being brutally murdered right in front of him, he doesn't seem to express much care, only a slight nervousness, which is probably for his own sake. This makes me ask a lot of questions. Want me to rapid fire? Too bad. Here we go. Was Tokuichi Towa the closest person to Haiji? If not, who was? Who else was Haiji close to, if anyone at all? If Haiji doesn't express much sadness regarding the death of his father, is it because he's numb to the pain, or is it a different reason? Was Tokuichi a shitty father to Haiji, thus making him also a victim of parental abuse? If so, is that another reason why he decided to be abusive to his little sister to feel some sense of power? Was he a mama's boy? I think that Haiji was indeed close to more people than just his father, because he specifically pluralizes the term loved ones. So that means there's more than one person he's thinking about, but he never says who. There are no signs that it could imply their connection, and thus I have to ask this. How the fuck am I supposed to care? Seriously, the entire resistance is composed of blue blob fucking nobodies who don't have a name or a face and all look the same and practically fucking sound the same, thus making a vast majority of the audience not give a shit, and the one human person, whole entire living being of our species, Homo sapien motherfucker you give us, is borderline given the same treatment. I know more about a nameless dead bodies family based on their dying message that I found in the street than I do Haiji's. He literally has so much potential to manipulate the player's emotional responses to this story and really make us feel the conflict of it all to an even higher degree than what we got, and yet he can't, all because of one single fucking throwaway joke. Oh, it is golden comedy fucking gold. We can't even call his absolute denseness endearing. No, stop the tape for a fucking hold on. He really he really is so fucking dense. And it's kind of hilarious, especially when you consider, like, the one time he even shows, like, a sign of a single brain cell being in his body is the fucking birthday puzzle. Oh my god. The fucking godforsaken birthday puzzle. Thank Christ you were there for that. But anyway, I want you to seriously imagine how cool it would have been if Haiji was built up to be this kind of jackass that you eventually get to turn around and see the side of him that you can actually sympathize with, only to find out that at the very end that he's starting to lose control of his anger and he is still, in fact, a jackass. But a jackass that's an actual threat. Well, I mean, okay, that's probably a little bit too far, because, I mean, a small child almost beat him in a physical fight, and I will die on the hill that she would have won if it wasn't for Big Bang Monokuma interrupting it. Because literally the only other adults that we know didn't deserve that and also had a name and a face to them barely had any screen time at all, especially compared to him. Oh, since we're on the subject of Haiji, I want to make a comment about something that I actually find legitimately hilarious. There are multiple times in the game in which Haiji is funny by complete accident. Some people say that the funniest moment with Haiji is when he cracks this joke about Nagisa, but I honestly don't find it funny solely because it doesn't have a flow to it. Yeah, okay. Even if I can't explain it, I disagree. But anyway, here's every single time that Haiji made me laugh. When he's first introduced, he opens the door like a drunkard, and the angle of the camera as he walks in makes him look like a slithering slug. I'm watching you, Wazowski. There's no music throughout this cutscene, by the way, so it really feels awkward when nobody's talking, and he stares at you for like a solid 4 seconds before saying anything as he's sitting down. It's like he needs to breathe in order to do that. He rides his motorcycle like a princess. This CG by itself actually tickles me because they all just look so upset. They look like they had plans that got canceled on them at the last minute. You can use him as a human shield until he betrays you. The birthday puzzle and the fact that it is his only brain cell moment, my favorite. My absolute fucking favorite. This cutscene, when you first enter the factory, and you see the lasers coming towards you, pause, look at their faces. Komaru and Toko flinch, and Haiji just stands there like a fucking buffoon oaf accepting his fate. You'd think that him knowing that the lasers trigger the alarm system that releases Monokumas would have a more visceral reaction from him, considering that he made a big fucking fuss about the fact that the Monokumas broke his arm and killed his dad, but no! He just takes the L! He totally gives up right there, and you can see the hope leaving his eyes. I didn't time it right. You should have said that earlier! Hey, I actually have a lot more that I want to say about the other side characters of this game, and I don't think I can be bothered to make another video about it, so I think I'm just gonna put it in here, because there's actually a lot of things I can tie to Haiji. I'm leaving that in, so I'm gonna do that. I think I've made my point clear about how Haiji is a worse character than we tend to talk about for more objective reasons. Though, I just want to make it clear that my biggest weakness with these kinds of things is falling in love with the character's potential. So with that being said, let's move on to the other characters that I wanted to talk about real quick. Yuta, Taichi, Hiroko, and Shirakuma. Okay, the literal only thing I have to say about Shirakuma is how the fuck did he get inside of Big Bang Monokuma's control room? Because the last time we saw him, he was a bodiless head being carried around by Hiroko. Is bodiless a word? Did she put him up there? If so, why? Did he, like, convince her to do that? Why would she agree to that? How did she even get inside of the control room herself? Haiji and Tokoichi are the only people who can pilot it, sure, but are they the only ones who can access it too? How was he controlling it anyway? Was it like some electromagnetic connection between the two bears or something? Hey, where did Hiroko go after the final battle? Was she in there? Is she okay? Where'd she go? I mean, she's probably still alive, because the epilogue states that most of the targets were saved thanks to her efforts, but fuck it, I'm gonna save my energy for the next couple of characters, because Lord, I am gonna need it. God, I sound like such a smug little bastard. A lot of people consider Yuta and Taichi to be the only two significant characters that die in this game, which is actually really interesting considering that this is a Danganronpa game, and major characters tend to drop like flies in no time at all, but the thing is that the former statement isn't even true! Yuta is actually the only major character that dies in this Danganronpa game. My overall opinion on Yuta's death is that I think it served its purpose in the story. It showed that you cannot leave the city, that you are trapped in here, or else your wristband will explode. Proving that, yeah, you're a lot more hopeless than you probably initially thought. Or at least Komaru did, but, you know, that's the way it rolls. But I do believe that it should have happened later rather than sooner to really make you feel like someone you were close to just died, because it's hard to mourn a character you barely know unless you wanted to go with the, quote-unquote, despair-inducing idea that he was a unique character that you didn't get the pleasure of connecting with. But even if you were to go with the latter, then you really shouldn't have fucking done what you did with Taichi. Oh my fucking god, you should not have done what you did with Taichi. Taichi Fujisaki is my favorite character from this game, and I'm mad that he didn't die. But I'm also mad that he died. Haiji is yet another character that you only get to see for like 5 minutes before he seemingly kicks the bucket. The entire point of this supposed death is to suggest the idea that maybe it was for the best that he died before he found out that his child that he is searching for is dead, and has been for quite a while now. This is such an intriguing and thought-provoking idea, especially for this game's story. It paints death as an act of mercy rather than punishment. It asks if Taichi is actually victorious in death rather than in life. So why the fuck would you go back on that? When you go back down to the first floor of Towa Tower, you pass by the elevator that Taichi unlocked for you, and his body is gone. Next to that is a note called "I Must Not Die," and the author claims that he will continue his search for his wife and child. A wise man known as my music composition professor once told me that if there is room for confusion, someone will take it. I like to add to that statement by saying that if there isn't room for confusion, someone will make it. The fact that Taichi's body is gone and that the note is in a spot right next to where it was seems to be a clear enough indication that this was, in fact, Taichi who wrote the note, especially considering the contents of said note match his sitch. But people are still in denial, so allow me to just point out something that I noticed while I was replaying the game one time. Alright, so, here's the thing. He's still... Are you seeing this? He's still fucking breathing! Yeah. They built up his entire character to do nothing but fulfill one single tiny purpose. To deliver one single message. And then they cucked him out of it. Sound familiar? This is Danganronpa, for fuck's fucking sake. One of the few times you decide to be merciful and let a character live when they nearly died and you did it wrong. I'm sorry. This isn't like me. I know, I'll speak with my dealer. You got the good shit. Thank you so much. I love you. Someone once, I just want to say this also as well before I move on. Someone once pointed out, like, you know, it's probably, unlikely that Taichi got very far, but at that point, it's just like, then why would they even make him get up in the first place? Like, if he was dead, then just say that he's dead. Don't, like, you know, be like, oh, you know, he left, that bear didn't kill him. Like, just fucking leave it at that. Jesus Christ, don't waste my fucking time. Don't go back on what you fucking said. I don't care. It's like, if there's, you had evidence that the body was right there, for fuck's sake. Oh, okay, you know what? I'm done. So, let me just say for the record, I do think that Taichi should have died, but without them going back on it, for the sake of sending that message to the audience. But I still think that, like what I said about Yuta, they should have given him more time before doing that. You could probably get away with killing Yuta off early like you did, but not quote-unquote killing Taichi off if you really needed to save that time, cause this is a video game after all. But doing both and just going back on that message anyway feels, cheap. Also, if Taichi were to live longer, I think seeing him interact with Hiroko would have been interesting. That would have helped develop them both, especially considering that they're in similar situations when it comes to finding their kids. If you wound up not suggesting the idea that maybe it was better that Taichi died instead of finding out about Chihiro's death, I think it would have been really interesting to see them both find out about the fates of their children together. That contrast would have been heartbreaking and incredibly impactful. But that's kind of where you're getting into territory that strays a bit too far from the objectives of the source material, so we'll mark it as something I do in a project that I'll tell you about later. Oh hey, while I'm at it, I want to point something out. Yuta, Taichi, Hiroko, and Haiji are all characters that we meet throughout Ultra Despair Girls. Have you ever noticed that despite their connections and similarities, none of these characters ever speak to each other? All of these characters might as well just exist in individual bubbles in individual worlds or universes. Like, what the hell? Fuck me for looking at a Danganronpa game and thinking that the characters should have connections, am I right? What am I, a fucking nerd? Normally stuff like this in Danganronpa games wouldn't be an issue because whenever a character dies in one of the mainline games, there's a good chance that we've either learned enough about them before their death or we learn something crucial about them during the trial for their murder. Even if we don't really get those, we still have the post-game modes, namely School Mode, Island Mode, and Salmon Team respectively, where we get to interact with them. UDG doesn't have that kind of mode. Also, Yuta, Taichi, and Haiji don't appear in Danganronpa S, while everyone else does, so we can't even get anything for them specifically out of that. Anyway, I get that everyone wants to write their stories in certain ways, but like I said with Haiji, intent doesn't make them immune to criticism, and it doesn't mean that any contradicting ideas are worse or even better. I kind of delved into the idea of comparing and contrasting Hiroko and Taichi's experiences and other things I've discussed in this video in one of my upcoming projects that I hope to launch sometime in 2024. It's called As Cruel As You, and it's a webcomic that I've been working on that's essentially an AU of Ultra Despair Girls, but with my own personal twist for no reason other than I wanted to explore the characters a bit more. And I wound up having a bit too much fun with it. I also wanted to ask the question of what would happen if UDG was the end of Danganronpa, and how that would be wrapped up while also fitting as many characters as I could into that one story. Basically, it was something I challenged myself to do for fun, and I want to share the results because I think they're cool. This is in no way me saying that it's better or worse than canon, because the objectives of UDG's canon story are different than mine. And a video game that's completely original is vastly different from a fan work based off of it. I have the luxury of knowing how the audience reacted, and they didn't. But I think that it doesn't take much common sense to see where you fucked up with Haiji Towa's character, even then. Link to the Tumblr in the description. I am still so fucking mad.